Everyone, thank you so much for joining the SLOconf meetup today. I'm super excited to be joined by two brilliant speakers, and all of you, if you have a lot of first timers, I just want to welcome you to the meetup. And today we are about to make some really exciting announcements, so please stay with us. And my name is Erza. Next slide, sorry. Thank you. My name is Erza and I work for Noble9. I have been a part of this community and this meetup for a period of 2 years. And I'm super excited to be joined by so many great co-organizers. If you go to the next slide, I just want to give a huge shout out to all of them. Kit Merker was, he's the guy who started this meetup 2 years ago. And we have been joined by a group of super talented people in the SRE community. Steph Hippo and Dylan Zare are from Google SRE, and then we have Zach Nickens, Dan Wilson, and Kemi Schmidt. A few of them are here today, so I just want to thank them for the amazing work they put into this meetup. And before we dive into the meetup, I just wanted to give a small breakdown of the agenda for today. We are about to make some really exciting announcements with the community. And after that, we have Julie Gunderson from Gremlin. She will be talking about the road to reliability. And after that, we have a breakout session. And this is a very popular, if you've been to the meetup before, you know that this is a very popular feature to the meetup because you have the chance to interact with people and to get to know each other. And once we've socialized a little bit, we have Vidya from Oracle. She will be talking about SRE at large enterprises. We will be finishing with a small Q&A session for the speakers. So please stay for that too. And
don't leave during the breakout. That's the one thing. Don't leave during the breakout.
Yeah,
everybody forgets to come back. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Thank you, Kit.
All right. Go ahead.
And this is a slide that I know Zach wanted to talk a little bit about.
Right. So some of our exciting news is that we've launched what we're calling the SLOconf Global Captains Program. So one of the great things about SLOconf last year was that we had participation from all over the world. We had such a great group of people come together. One of the great things about our meetup is that we have people from all over the world that want to participate, but it's really hard for a lot of folks to participate in the time due to time zones, right? Like, and so we've been trying to figure out a way to address this and like actually bring SLOconf to, make it truly global. And so what we've done is we have a core group of global captains that we've nominated, and they have graciously accepted to share their time with us. And over the next several months, we're going to be working on training those captains up, getting them involved with our planning committee for not only our monthly SLOconf monthly, but also for the next slide. So next slide. So this is our 4 core captains. So we have Ehi in Africa, Bargar in India, Abby in the UK, and Kazia in Poland. So we've got 4 amazing leaders that take the charge of this global program, and we're going to push all of our SLOconf goodness out globally, get it distributed. Our long-term plan is to create local chapters in all of these new geos. That's going to be a little hard with COVID still being a thing, right? Like, we don't want to push folks into in-person meetings before it's safe and everybody's comfortable doing that. But we want to do the work now so that whenever it's safe, everybody's ready to do that, we can launch local chapters. We can have in-person meetups all around the globe. Eventually, we'll have to talk Kit into paying to send a group of us to Antarctica on a work trip, so that we can say that we are doing SLOconf on all continents.
I think Antarctica falls into the air budget. We'll do the rest of the world.
Okay, it's within the air budget. So our plan is to eventually have in-person local recurring meetups on every continent, any place where folks want to gather and talk about SLOs and all the great things about reliability engineering. We want to make sure that they have a chance and a forum to do that. So in addition to this big global domination plan that we have, the next big announcement, I'm going to let Kit make this announcement.
You guys ready? SLOconf 22. We're announcing it today. We're doing it May 9th through 12th. We're back. Oh, you can't hear the claps. Come on, round of applause. All right. So the CFP is opening today. If you go to SLOconf.com right now, you can go see the updated dates. You can register for the event. You can still see all the content from last year, all the tracks, everything there. Somebody's scraping their microphone. Mute yourself. Okay.
We're good.
We're fancy this year. We're using pay per call, and Alex Hidalgo put together the CFP process and the new tracks and everything. So Alex is making sure that we get high quality talks. We're going to use the format. Everything is going to be pretty much the same as last year. We're still sticking with the attend while you work. Wait, we have some more slides on this, right? Oh yeah. Remember last year? Remember how amazing this was? Guys, come on. We're going to have the same kind of 10-minute talks. We're going to use the buddy system. We're going to have the Slack channels. We're going to have, the daily stand-up. Like, we're bringing back everything that worked last year. We've already started talking to some of the sponsors from last year. Pretty much everybody has said they're coming back and doing it again. And I think we're going to have some new exciting ones as well. And look, at the community has gotten so much bigger over the course of the last year. I think it's just incredible. So mark your calendars. You need to be there. Register. Tell all your friends.
So
let's see.
Let's go to the next slide. Yep. So
important dates. Here we go.
CFP is open today. Registration in CFP open today. So don't waste any time. If you were a speaker last year, we want you back. If you didn't speak last year, but you really like the content, we want you to speak this year. Especially, we love having first-time speakers. If you've never participated at a conference, if you've never been involved in a conference, we want you involved in this. This is a truly, it's a place for everybody. And I implore you that if you even think you have an inkling of an idea, reach out to somebody on the planning committee, reach out to one of the global captains, talk to somebody, tell us your idea. We will figure out a way to make it work. We want you to participate.
I would just say, like, and I talked to Alex Hidalgo about this, we're because of the format, because there's no schedule, we can be maximally inclusive, right? There's no limitation on how many talks we can have because we don't have to fit into a schedule. So the more the merrier. We're basically going to say, we want to help people optimize to make it interesting. We'll cut things that are off topic or obvious sales pitches. But everybody pretty much followed the rules last year. And I think that led to a fantastic set of content. So anything else any questions on SLOconf before we move on? Raise your hand if you're going to come. Yeah, maybe. Dylan says no. Okay, fine. He'll be there. Okay, all right, good. Okay, cool. Urza, back to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And speaking of SLOconf, super excited to announce, to present Julie to you today. Julie actually was one of the brilliant speakers we had at SLOconf last year. Her talk was really popular, and I am so excited to have Julie here today with us as we're announcing the new SLOconf. Today, Julie will be speaking about the road to reliability. And whenever you're ready, Julie, feel free to take over the screen.
So first of all, really quick on SLOconf, I have to say how excited I am. I'm an organizer of a conference, and that said, if I could have you all organize my conference for me, I would, because the conference was amazing. It was an amazing experience to be a speaker just because of how great you all made the experience. But the other thing about it was the attendees and the excitement. And it's really hard to feel that with remote conferences. And I thought it was amazing. So y'all did a great job. If anybody is even remotely interested in speaking, I would highly say do it. It is such a good experience. And so with that, I guess I can talk about the road to reliability now. Can you all see my screen with the slides on it is the question.
Yes,
or can you see my screen with all the Slack messages that I'm sending my team, telling them about the SLOconf dates? Just making sure you can see the right screen, which our team is very excited too. So again, Really, really excited about that. Thank you for doing it again this year. I can't wait. And with that, so let's talk about the road to resilience. So I'm Julie Gunderson. I'm a senior reliability advocate here at Gremlin. And I'm really excited to chat because I love doing that and talking about why reliability is really no accident. And so we've learned that over the years, right? We have to work towards reliability. It takes work. It takes a plan, strategy, and tactical actions. And that includes teamwork and collaboration, right? One of the things that we talk about, that you talk a lot about, you know, SLOs, SLIs, do people understand what those are? Are they shared with the teams? Do they understand the why we're working towards these numbers? Just things that we really need to consider on that journey to reliability. And so I kind of want to talk about, how do we make our systems more reliable? Shocker. There's been some major outages lately, right? Over the last few years, there's been a massive increase in outages and what we call high severity incidents. I mean, there were outages in Japan that disrupted like a huge amount of companies in Tokyo. There was an outage at Salesforce that had such a severe outage due to a DNS issue back in May that their own status page was inaccessible. Or this one might be on the top of folks' mind. Remember this Amazon outage that just happened? And this is what happened. And this is what the internet looked like. And it broke. Look, our systems are complex and failures are inherent to complex systems. And so you can't just say, well, we're just not going to use AWS because then we clearly won't have any outages, because outages happen no matter what provider you're using. There was a major Google Cloud outage. We've seen those Fastly outages. And I'm not trying to pick on folks. What I'm kind of trying to get people to think about is when we look at outages, there can be a major downstream effect, and that includes this domino effect beyond the outage. So where we can't necessarily prevent issues with the third-party folks that we work with, how do we prevent or how do we mitigate how these types of things can affect us? And so chaos engineering is kind of a great way to think through all of this in a systematic and logical way, but also with your team. So you don't look at SRE as somebody sitting over in a corner by themselves that you don't talk to, right? We're looking at how can you learn and work with your coworkers to build a more reliable internet. And so as mentioned, I'm Julie Gunderson. I'm a reliability advocate here at Gremlin. Prior to working at Gremlin, I was actually over at PagerDuty, so spending a lot of time in this incident space. And as mentioned to folks here, I live in Idaho, and anybody is welcome to come morel hunting with bears with me in Idaho. That said, one of the things that I want to talk about today, and that I'm going to talk a bit about in this talk, is this resource here, which is the book Accelerate. If you've read it, awesome. If not, I highly recommend picking it up. It was written by Dr. Nicole Forsgren, and Nicole is responsible for the DOOR report. It was also written by Gene Kim, who wrote the Phoenix Project, and Jez Humble, who was SRE over at Google. So this is a really excellent book and resource to read. And they've done an amazing job of collecting all of the research they gathered from practicing DevOps over the years, and also creating that DevOps survey and report that Puppet would send out. So what this group did is they took 4 years of research and they came together to analyze that data in a great way, to bubble it up and to say what the most important things that you needed to do to create a high-performing technology organization, and also building and scaling high-performing teams. In Accelerate, they focus a lot on tempo and stability. And a lot of the times folks ask, like, well, how do you measure chaos engineering? How do you make sure that you're doing the right thing when you're doing this work? How do you prove that the work you're doing is actually making a difference and is able to move that needle, especially if you have a lot of different people doing a lot of different projects? And as we know, it's important to be able to measure things, right? And to be able to measure back and say, this is the work we did. This is how we moved the needle. This is the ROI we got from the work. And over the years, a lot of research has been conducted and books have been written on how to improve the resilience of our software. I want to deep dive into two of the key practices in the book, tempo and stability. And these are two practices to help improve tempo and stability. You can look at game days and chaos engineering to do that. So what is tempo and stability? Well, tempo is measured by deployment frequency and change lead time. And stability is measured by mean time to recover, so MTTR, and change failure rate. So if we break it down a little bit further, deployment frequency would be the rate that software is deployed to production of an app store, for example. So within a range of multiple times a day to maybe a really long deployment frequency like once a year. Tempo would be change lead time. So the time it takes to go from a customer making a request, so say a customer has a feature request, to that feature being built and rolled out to where that customer can use it. The time it takes basically to go from a customer making a request to that request being satisfied. And then stability is our mean time to recover. It's the mean time it takes a company to recover from downtime of their software. And stability change failure rate is the likelihood of defect changes. So if you roll out 5 changes, how many of those will have a defect, and how many of those might you need to roll back or might you need to apply a patch for? Is that like 1 out of 5 or 2 out of 5? And those are some of the metrics that Accelerate recommends that you measure. So kind of back to these key practices of how we can make these things better. So there are really 3 practices that they've identified in Accelerate, right? Chaos engineering, game days, disaster recovery. And according to Accelerate, you should focus on improving your reliability because it's the foundation that enables you to have a really great tempo. It enables you to improve developer velocity, which makes so much sense. But what's really nice is that, again, they're backing this up with 4 years of research. And we know that engineers feel more confident when software is reliable, and because they feel more confident to write new code, they feel more confident that their features that they're building are going to work well. They understand all the different failure modes because they have been focusing on reliability and trying to improve reliability. So that makes you actually ship code faster and more reliably. And I feel like I might be talking a little bit fast for everybody. If I am, I'm sorry. This is normally a little bit of a longer talk and I have some slides that I want to show. So you can all just yell at me in the chat to slow down. But in Accelerate, they say that we should build systems that are designed to be deployed easily and can detect and tolerate failures and can have various components of the system updated independently. And this is a lot of different things that are really great to work towards. So I want to focus more on the detect and tolerate failures specifically. So what's the best way to know if your system can detect and tolerate failures? And I'll let everybody guess here. If you want to guess in the chat, or I could just say chaos engineering. Mike, you can find a link for the book. Just Google Accelerate Nicole Forsgren, and you'll find it on the Amazon, just to let you know. So chaos engineering, right? Big surprise. I really wanted to use some word art here and I couldn't find it. So we just used some great animation, right? Chaos engineering. This is the best way to know that your system can detect and tolerate failure, to purposefully inject real failure to see how your system can handle it. So I'm going to show you a little demo that I took screenshots of because I do not trust those demo gods here to make sure that everything will work. But this is a really cool open source project that you can find on Google Cloud Platform on their GitHub webpage. It's a repo called the Bank of Anthos, so definitely check it out. I'll post some links to this when I'm done talking. This is the architecture diagram. And it's really great for learning how to practice chaos engineering because it's a banking application. It's an internet banking application. It has multiple languages, so both Python and Java, which is pretty common these days. And when you're working on a system, there's oftentimes those multiple languages. Then there's two databases. There's an account database, a ledger database, which are running on Postgres. And then we have our transaction history service, a balance reader service, a ledger writer, contacts and user service, our front end, and our load generator. So this is what it looks like. So when we're practicing chaos engineering, one question we would ask ourselves is when we're practicing this, we don't just willy-nilly start to turn things off. We start with a hypothesis. What's our hypothesis? We want to think through what's going to happen. And this is really important too when we go back to SLOs, because when we set SLOs, we don't want to just set those in a vacuum, right? There's the concept of, you want 100% uptime. When does that ever really work, right? Or we're just going to work towards nothing and just hope and pray. Also, not a strategy. We want to validate that what we've set is actually achievable. And that is really important to think through. So that's one of the reasons that I say use chaos engineering to validate this. And we want to think through what is going to happen. Are we going to breach some of our contractual requirements? So like right here, I want to say, if we black hole a critical path like the balance reader, are we going to have a graceful degradation of the customer service? Are we going to breach some of our SLOs? So you can kind of think through that. What do you think is going to happen if I black hole a service? You can type that in the chat or you can shout it out. These are questions we should ask ourselves with our services. What happens if we can't reach it? So when I do this, I'm going to black hole this service. Again, there's links to actually how you can do this and practice it on your own. And we can see that as we run this experiment, we can make the service unavailable. And this is what it looks like when we run our service. You can see that there's some dashes on the checking account. We can't see what's going on. Is this an acceptable experience though for our customers? And we want to think through what that experience is like. It could really make a user really, really confused, but can they still make transactions? They should still be able to make those deposits. That's our hypothesis, that even if the balance reader is unavailable, we can still function as a bank, right? If we try to make a payment and are unable to do it though, are we getting a message that's friendly for our users? This is also something that folks really need to think about. When we see this error message, is this something that only engineers can understand? Is this when your mom is going to call you, or your best friends, and they're like, hey, can you fix this because my bank is broken? Think about that when we're designing our systems and that end user experience and what those error messages they're going to receive are. It's really important to think through that and that user experience. We want to, if possible, remove things from the web page that are not important to that user because we want it to degrade gracefully for them. So just remember to think through all of that. And as I mentioned, there's some links. I will post all of these in the chat when I'm done so that you can get to the demo environment so that you can practice some of these things. But there's also different types of failure modes, and I don't have time to walk you through all of these experiments, but I will definitely post some links that you can try. But we can look at how our transaction history would be affected if we start attacking that and making it unavailable. We can see that maybe we get some different error messages that are more useful to the customers. And so as I just kind of zip through these so that I have enough time to tell you the rest of the important stuff, game days are also another great way to practice. I will share the slides, David, and for everybody that was curious, I will definitely share these slides with you. So another practice is game days, and game days are really awesome because they're great team building experiences, and they're something else that the book Accelerate talks about. They build relationships and trust within organizations because they not only help you to improve your stability and reliability, but also definitely tempo, because it enables you to work closely with other teams that you want to have better relationships with, especially if you're in a larger engineering organization. And like an example game day, all you really need is to invite 4 or more people to attend, and maybe at least 2 teams. And you might want to know, if you have some type of failure, how it appears to the other team, or if they have some sort of failure, how does that affect your system? You do not have to spend hours running game days. You can do these in 10 minutes if you want. So game days are a really great way to think through systematically your infrastructure, your architecture, and how everything's working together. And so there are other examples of game days. You can do dependency testing, capacity plan testing, auto scaling. And like I said, I will go ahead and send these slides out for everybody. And we can definitely talk about disaster recovery and how it can improve tempo and stability. Again, you can practice these within game days. Just invite 4+ people to attend. You can fail over some services. And really, it can take like 5 minutes to run these experiments. And so, yes, you can absolutely automate all of this. We want you to codify these types of experiments and make them shareable for the rest of the team, because you can also show a history of all of your experiments, and you can save this. This can help automate everything. And it's really nice because you don't have to go around teaching everyone the SRE best practices. You can just build a system that can quickly go in and check, and you can give people tips, and they can do better work moving forward. And so just to let you know, we actually have some free certifications that talk about, like, in general, the practices of chaos engineering. You can go to gremlin.com/certification. That's my only product pitch right there. They're free. I might have created the second one. So if you want to go take it, definitely give me some feedback. And then thank you. And I will pass this on. I think I went a minute over. I am so sorry, Urza.
Vidya, who's a senior director of SRE at Oracle, will be talking about SRE at large enterprises. So Vidya, thank you for doing this. And whenever you're ready, let's share screen.
Super. Thank you. Let me pull up my awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Kit and Urza, for having me here on the SLOconf monthly kickoff, as you do. You're right. 2 years ago, we met at the Google new campus in Seattle when you had the first meetup. And I cannot believe that was 2 years ago. And the world has literally changed in those 2 years, which is scary. But I'm super excited to be doing this. I just thought I'll, start off by thanking for having me here, and more importantly, bringing attention to SLO as such a core concept as we are navigating this current world as software engineers. Wanted to start off by introducing myself a little bit and my own career journey. I started in very much shrink wrap software. First job out of college was in Microsoft Windows, learned a lot in the networking division. I moved on to do a little bit of B2C at drugstore. I didn't stay there very long because right next to them were Expedia, literally the next office, and I walked across and joined Expedia. They were starting B2B, Expedia corporate travel, and that was sort of the beginning of probably SaaS as we know it back then. It wasn't really SaaS, we were just taking a B2C product and making it available to B2B, and soon we realized, that's not how you actually build B2B. You really need to make it software as a service if you're actually trying to sort of sell it to large enterprises, and if you want to compete with American Express. And funnily enough, now that division has been acquired by American Express, but that was all more than 6 years ago. When I left Expedia, I spent a dozen years building that SaaS product, learned a lot. I have to say almost everything I learned whether it was how to add business value, how to eliminate toil, automation, everything that we talk about. I was doing all that for the Expedia SaaS corporate travel business. We had lots of acquisitions globally, so help bring the platforms together. So unification of platform with the backend platform being really my team's responsibility, CI/CD platformization, all of that. While all of that was going on, the industry definitely was, it was 2007, 2008, people were coming around to say, oh, we need DevOps. That was happening in parallel. I had no idea. I was very much internally focused to solve problems that our sort of unit was facing. And, I was recommending organizations that made sense, that was very engineering centric. I was probably asking for support and operations to be all under this one platform, not for any other reason other than it just made sense, right? So that's how we were doing it in a very organic way. And then one fine day, I woke up and I went, okay, I think this place has become too big. I want to be more in a startup mode. And I decided to step out of Expedia and wanted to just start something on my own as well. This again is, pre-pandemic when work from home wasn't as popular. So I thought I'll get more flexibility, and I started my own little consulting business, thinking, oh, I've learned a lot about this, all these things. Maybe I can go share outside, really oblivious of how much the industry had already shaped those thought processes as well, which was great timing because as I stepped out and started my consulting, DevOpsly.com, it was kind of, I wouldn't say prime, but at least a lot of it was ready. The DevOps movement had started, the Phoenix Project book had come out. So it was definitely the time for me to bring up some of those conversations. So I did that for about 6 years in the middle, all of my consulting. DevOpsly, and then just because I love to help people with their careers, I continue to do this. mytechladder.com, it's just a give back project to help people with their careers. And then 6 months ago, someone at Oracle who used to be at Expedia approached, and I said, oh, maybe it is a good time to bring some of my learnings back into corporate America in a large enterprise setting. And that's sort of my journey. And the more important piece here is that it's all been really centered around DevOps and SRE. For the most part, I didn't know that's what I was doing. I was doing all of it without calling it DevOps and SRE. And I'm very thankful that an entire industry had emerged around it, because, that made it easy for me to build my career once I left Expedia, I should say. When I first left Expedia, I was like, oh, I'm going to go consult. I'm going to be a classic, I'm going to do the assessment. I'm going to show how to have quick wins and build actionable roadmap, things that all consultants talk about. But very quickly, I learned a few lessons, and I thought I'll share some of that with everybody here. The very, very first lesson is that, I don't know, I'd love to hear from others, but if you are in a large enterprise, so most of my consulting when I was at DevOpsly doing my consulting business were, this was GE, Pepsi, like really large enterprises. And the number one lesson I learned when I was bringing some of my consulting viewpoints around SRE practice, DevOps practice, was that you're entering the state of denial. There is often, if it is an established, if it's an established business, with a lot of dollars flowing through, you won't often hear that reliability is the number one problem in those very words. You may hear it very differently, but no one's going to no one's going to openly admit. I'd love to hear if others have had different experience. If you want to chime in, if that lesson resonates with everybody. Would you agree? Is that a state of denial is sort of where you would also see some of your own teams or teams around you when embarking on this journey?
1,000,000%.
Yeah, that's almost where I have seen it as well, right? Like it's almost like I don't think I have that problem is where they all start. But what is even more interesting is right after that denial, I realized, I don't know how many of you have read this book, Duck Rabbit. If not, look it up. It's a great read even for adults. I used to love reading this to my kids, but this book is exactly what I also find a lot of enterprises were going through as well, right? DevOps versus SRE, DevOps or SRE, DevOps and SRE. Some of them looked at me and went, oh, but you're all DevOps. We don't want you. We want SRE. Okay, someone else is like, oh, don't just bring to me the way Google has done it. I'm unique, you can't just treat me. I'm talking about large enterprises. I'm not another Google. So it's just very interesting to see that lesson being, you really, people are going to be constantly looking at it as whether it's a duck or the rabbit scenario, and either which way the problems exist, right? You can't really, which is the number 3 lesson I have, you can't really be saying, I'm going to bring the solution looking for a problem. And that was an important lesson for sure, particularly in the SRE realm, because how we have some awesome work already being done. These books have provided some great insights, but yet it's very, very hard if you go to the large enterprises and say, I've got the solution already. And most definitely the hardest part would be if you start with re-architectures, sort of being at that end of the spectrum. So definitely lesson number 3 was what stuck with me the most. Just curious to hear about this one as well. Like, do people end up seeing similar sort of approaches? Like, do you feel people are either looking for a very specific implementation like the Google implementation, or do you see people want it a lot more customized for their needs when it's a large enterprise? And I'm speaking strictly large enterprise, because I have consulted for startups, mid-sized startups especially, where they're looking for the opposite, right? They just want, because they've even been at Google, they just want you to go and implement exactly the way it was done at Google, versus the larger enterprises are obviously not looking for that.
Well, I can tell you, I've definitely heard that please don't use the terms Google, Netflix, or any of those, because we're not like them. We need it to be special. Yeah.
And I think when you're a large enterprise, there is also there's both the concern about we are special and we are different, but also maybe there is a little bit of concern associated with being the expectation of that level of change. That's been my observation, is people are concerned about, wow, how will we bring about that much change, right? That's kind of fundamentally, I think, where it's coming from. That's been at least my psychological assessment of it. So it's really critical to not be very, critical to handle that with tender gloves is sort of my takeaway. The other lesson here is really, I do feel this is important, but you have to kind of do it with the right group of people with large enterprises, is really painting that picture. You have to help them think big without yet saying, hey, you become Netflix, right? Or you become Google. So how do you really help them think big and get through that crawl, walk, run, fly, and type of a picture you want to paint in a very safe and a secure way of handling that conversation. And there again, I'm curious. Julie, you mentioned, not Netflix, not Google. If others have experienced as well as what you might have seen, Julie, in terms of, is there resistance coming from, like, when you're painting the picture to think big, or is it more a concern where you just want to first show them how to crawl before talking about flying?
So when I've heard it, it's always been like we can't do things because we don't operate at the speed that they do. When people really it's exactly that. It's that biting off all the change at once, and we need to be Google overnight, or let's understand how to make incremental changes.
Yeah. And incremental changes, and you talked about this as well, and that's kind of where my crawl analogy is coming from. And crawling too, I think in my experience, I love this graphic because it shows how many different crawling styles are out there, which is important to keep in mind when working with large enterprises, because even when you say crawl, it's not going to all look the same, right? So really, much like baby crawling styles can differ, so do the forms of gradual small changes and the crawling that each of the enterprises may require. So I just thought I'll start off by sharing in a more in a lighthearted way some of my lessons learned. Having said that, I didn't just stick to those crawl to Wonder Woman fly pictures. Had a little bit of a stronger point of view once I felt like the teams were ready, that I was starting to share, which was a combination of capabilities and principles, really emphasizing, of course, heavily on, the organization aspect of it, right? How do you organize? How do you really leverage the talent you currently have, as well as what kind of talent should you bring in? And I'll talk about that in a second as well. How do you think about the skill sets that an SRE, a reliability engineer should bring into your organization vis-a-vis what a dev might already have? And of course, how do you think about organizing all of these within the large enterprise? But by and large, focusing on these principles, which probably many of you have already been regularly reading about, if not already practicing, right? Definitely tying it with the lean processes, whether it is agile or any other form. Don't underestimate toil in any way, always keeping that front and center, that you really want to drive towards toil elimination. And most importantly, blameless culture. This is something, going to the denial part, which was my number one lesson, right? It's like, oh, we don't have a problem here. It was just that XYZ didn't really do that task they were supposed to do. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had an outage, something that's very much that needs to change from a conversation of, it's not that they applied the incorrect script, but really evaluating the data, which will paint the picture for you and allow you to tell the story. Why did they end up in that state? What happened because of which some of these incentives and needs to be shared, as opposed to putting it on just one team. There are various other principles, including chaos engineering, that was covered earlier, which is of course a big piece of it. But these are some core. There's so much to go into each of these. I'm happy to do it over other session as well. Really important to figure out within these principles for a given organization, how do you build this framework and bucket them on these various capabilities, right? Basic, standard, advanced, and dynamic. This is sort of how the maturity model went in terms of how I was doing it through my consulting, but really mapping the organization's capabilities in all of those areas that we looked at in the previous slide, and then mapping it into, some of them may have very advanced version control, but at the same time, they may not really have, believe it or not, very good monitoring, right? So if that's the case, you may still not have a very high SRE capability possible, because you are in the basic on the platform and architecture side, even though you may be using other GitOps capabilities as an example. So mapping out these standard to advanced capabilities really helped in a large enterprise context. And then going back to the crawl, walk, fly analogy, it's kind of the opposite, right? You really want to paint the picture, like I was saying, you want to really think big. You want to paint the picture of, yes, you can fly, so that at least you have a handful of people who kind of get that notion, but then you really want to start small. You have to identify what are some core services where there is the greatest need for reliability. That's been my experience, is just identifying the first couple of services, first couple of early adopters is super key in this journey. That will really allow you to scale once you've kind of identified that. I think there was in our breakout room a discussion around even if you were to do that, to start small, where do you really start? And for me, this is the fundamental starting point. You have to really start with your metrics. You have to really understand. Most of my work that I've been doing over the last few years is just crunching through the data that might be already there, whether it's from alerting or infrastructure monitoring or just application metrics, right? Error messages that may be there, error signatures that are captured but no one's analyzed. Looking through that data and start to build the story from those metrics before you can decide what to measure, because that's the actionable part. By looking at the metrics, you can then start to paint the picture. So that's on the getting started with SRE part. The big piece is metrics, and other piece is defining organization, which again was brought up in the breakout room as a question. There's no right answer, and I think Kit, you had some great points in terms of there is a consultative approach even within an enterprise versus an embedded approach. But I think by and large, really what I've also experienced is it's very key for SRE to be aware that they've got their foot on both sides, right? You really need to be aware of all the changes being made, both on the product side as well as on the infrastructure side, which is, I think, really important. You can't be focused only on just the app or the infra. You really have to, you're the one as an organization or as an engineer, as an SRE, keeping an eye on both of those aspects. And then this being another key part of the role, recurring problems, which is what you're really trying to go after. How do you really identify those those patterns and try to bring that down, whether it is on the toil front or even in your error budget. So that's the defining organization part. And then another big part here, which I was talking about earlier, is really providing clarity on what does a reliability engineer do vis-a-vis a development engineer. So really paying attention to the fact that a reliability engineer is a lot more focused on the dashboarding, the change management aspects of it, versus what a development engineer might be looking at, for example. And there is definitely more and more expectation that engineers are T-shaped. You might have all heard of that framework already in terms of skill set. You are expected to be much more T-shaped than maybe even 5 years ago in terms of skill set. I think I went 2 minutes over. I am going to pause right here and leave everyone with the reminder to crawl, crawl, and crawl before you walk, run, and fly, because the more you spend time doing this, figuring out the different styles, as there might be various styles within a large organization, it becomes easier to get to the other parts. Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate. I am sorry if I missed the message that time was approaching.
No, it's okay.